What happens when the galaxy's most advanced civilizations dismiss a species as primitive scavengers, only to discover they've awakened something that has spent millennia perfecting the art of survival? What occurs when beings who have never known true fear encounter creatures that evolved in a world where everything wanted to kill them? The Galactic Council thought they knew all there was to know about warfare, diplomacy, and power. They had conquered stars, enslaved entire species, and built empires that spanned light years. They looked at humanity and saw nothing but another weak species ripe for exploitation. They were about to learn the difference between being apex predators in a controlled environment and being apex predators who clawed their way to the top of a death world's food chain. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a single human who would show the galaxy exactly why his species had earned the right to call Earth home. This is the story of how underestimating humanity became the galaxy's greatest mistake. When the hunters become the hunted, when the predators become the prey, when the mighty discover they are not alone at the top of the food chain, that's when the real story begins. Marcus Chen stood at the observation deck of Station Kepler 442, watching the massive dreadnought eclipse the distant star. The ship belonged to the Zephyrian Empire, one of the three dominant powers in this sector of the galaxy. Its hull gleamed with the same arrogant polish as its crew, who strutted through the station's corridors like they owned the universe. Which, Marcus supposed, they practically did. The human pressed his palm against the reinforced viewport, feeling the subtle vibration as the alien vessel's engines powered down. Around him, other species hurried about their business. The insectoid Chitauri with their nervous clicking, the plant-like Verdani swaying as they communicated through chemical signals, and dozens of others. All of them shared the same careful, measured movements of beings who knew their place in the cosmic hierarchy, all except Marcus. Fascinating, came a voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Administrator Keleth approaching, the Zephyrian's forearms gesturing in what might have been amusement. The human observes our arrival with curiosity rather than the proper deference. Marcus kept his expression neutral, just admiring the engineering. That's a beautiful ship. Keleth's translator rendered something that might have been laughter. Beautiful and deadly young human. The Sovereign's might has reduced 13 worlds to ash. Perhaps your species should learn to show appropriate respect. Respect is earned, Marcus said quietly, still watching the dreadnought. Where I come from, anyway. The administrator's chitness feature shifted into what Marcus had learned to recognize as a Zephyrian sneer. Where you come from? Yes, I have heard of this Earth. A primitive world filled with violent creatures fighting over scraps. Your species has barely achieved interstellar travel, and yet you speak of earning respect? Marcus finally turned away from the viewport. At 6 feet tall, he stood eye to eye with the alien, despite Keleth's species averaging nearly 7 feet in height. You know, Administrator, you're absolutely right about Earth being violent. Everything there wants to kill everything else. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria. Precisely why civilized species regard humans as little more than sophisticated vermin. The thing is, Marcus continued, his voice remaining conversational, when everything on your world is trying to kill you, you get really, really good at killing back. Natural selection tends to work that way. Keleth's 4 eyes narrowed. Is that a threat, human? Observation, Marcus corrected. Like admiring your ship. Speaking of which, I notice your docking bay protocols are interesting. You leave your primary power coupling exposed during the docking sequence. That's either supreme confidence or... How do you know about our power systems? The administrator's voice had gone cold. Marcus shrugged. I observe things. Occupational hazard. On Earth, the things that stop observing tend to get eaten. Before Khalif could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in amber as beings scattered in all directions. Through the viewport, Marcus could see smaller ships detaching from the dreadnought's belly, sleek fighters moving with predatory grace toward the station. What's happening? Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already had a good idea. Keleth's translator crackled with what sounded suspiciously like satisfaction. Routine enforcement action. This station has been harboring refugees from our latest territorial acquisitions. The Sovereign has decided to make an example. Refugees, Marcus repeated. You mean families running from your war machine? I mean criminals fleeing justice. Criminals who will be returned to face trial, along with any who aided them. Marcus watched the fighters take attack positions around the station. Hundreds of beings, families, children, elderly, trapped with nowhere to run. The Zephyrians wouldn't care about collateral damage. Why would they? Who would stop them? How long do you estimate this enforcement action will take? Marcus asked casually. Perhaps an hour. The station will surrender quickly once they realize resistance is futile. Your species would do well to remember this lesson. Marcus nodded slowly. You know, Administrator, you mentioned earlier that everything on Earth tries to kill everything else. What of it? You left out the most important part. Marcus moved away from the viewport, heading toward the station's central hub. The reason everything tries to kill everything else is because some things actually succeed. Kaleth called after him, confusion evident in the alien's voice. Where are you going, human? Marcus paused at the corridor junction. To observe things. Maybe learn something new about earning respect. The human disappeared into the maze of station corridors, leaving the administrator staring after him. Around them, the wailing alarms painted everything in urgent amber, and through the viewport, the Zephyrian fighters moved closer. Marcus made his way through the panicking crowds toward the station's engineering section. He'd spent 3 weeks aboard Kepler 442, supposedly as a cultural liaison for the Human Colonial Authority. In reality, he was exactly what he'd told Kaleth, an observer, and what he'd observed was a galaxy ruled by bullies who'd never encountered real predators. The engineering deck was in chaos. Station personnel ran diagnostic checks while trying to coordinate with the docking authority. Nobody paid attention to the human who slipped past security checkpoints with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to moving unseen. Marcus found what he was looking for in the primary systems bay, the station's defensive grid controls. The weapons were old but functional, designed primarily for deflecting asteroids and debris. Against Zephyrian fighters, they'd be useless in any conventional engagement. But Marcus hadn't survived 20 years of Black Ops by thinking conventionally. His fingers flew over the control interface, years of xenotechnology training allowing him to navigate the alien systems. The Zephyrians expected surrender or at best token resistance. They wouldn't be prepared for someone who understood that the best predators were those that made their enemies underestimate them. Phase 1 was misdirection. Marcus triggered a cascade failure in the station's main communication array, making it appear that critical systems were failing. The Zephyrian fighters would interpret this as the beginning of surrender preparations. Phase 2 was patience. Marcus settled in to wait, watching the tactical display as enemy fighters moved into their final positions. They were following standard Zephyrian doctrine, tight formations designed to maximize firepower while protecting their flanks. Textbook strategy that worked perfectly against conventionally thinking opponents. The lead fighter pilot's voice crackled through the commandeered comm system. Station Kepler 442. You will lower your shields and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your habitat sections. Marcus smiled. Time for Phase 3. Instead of responding through normal channels, he patched into the fighter squadron's tactical frequency. When he spoke, his voice carried the calm certainty of someone stating simple facts. Zephyrian vessels, this is Marcus Chen of the Human Colonial Authority. You have 60 seconds to withdraw from this system. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 heartbeats before exploding into alien laughter and cursing. Bah! Human, you will stand down immediately, came the squadron leader's response. Your pathetic species has no authority here. 55 seconds, Marcus said conversationally. You have what, a handful of cargo ships in this sector? Against the Sovereign's might? This is either madness or... 50 seconds. You know your formation flying is impressive. Very precise. Must take years of training to maintain those tight intervals. More confused chatter filled the frequency. Marcus could imagine the fighter's pilots looking around nervously, suddenly aware that someone was watching their every move. 45 seconds. The spacing between your second and third wings is exactly 47.3 meters. Your lead fighter's engine temperature is running 3 degrees hot. Your squadron's total ammunition loadout is approximately 68% of maximum. The chatter stopped. How do you... The squadron leader began. 40 seconds. Oh, and your dreadnought's primary power coupling is currently exposed. Probably should mention that. Now there was real alarm in the alien voices. Marcus had just demonstrated intimate knowledge of their formation, their equipment, and their mothership's vulnerabilities. From their perspective, he was either incredibly well-informed or... 35 seconds. You're wondering how I know these things. Fair question. See, on my world, survival depends on observation. We notice things like how your fighter's maneuvering thrusters have a 0.8-second delay on course corrections, or how your shield generators cycle every 12 seconds during combat operations. Marcus paused, letting that sink in. 30 seconds. We also notice things like how your current formation puts you in perfect position for a cascading interdiction field collapse. That's impossible, the squadron leader snarled. This station doesn't have that kind of technology.
You're absolutely right.
This station doesn't. Marcus's fingers found the final sequence of controls. Hidden throughout the conversation, his words had contained coded transmissions, signals that would mean nothing to Zephyrian ears but everything to the right recipients. 25 seconds. But the 3 ships that have been shadowing your dreadnought for the past 6 hours do. The tactical display erupted in new contacts. 3 vessels uncloaked simultaneously. Sleek, predatory shapes that seemed to bend light around them. Human ships, but unlike anything in the official colonial fleet records. Impossible, the squadron leader's voice cracked. Our sensors showed nothing. 20 seconds. Your sensors are calibrated to detect standard drive signatures and energy outputs. Ours are designed to hunt things that don't want to be found. The human ships moved with fluid precision, taking positions that turn the Zephyrian formation from an attack pattern into a trap. Warning lights flashed across alien control boards as targeting systems locked onto their fighters. 15 seconds, last chance to withdraw. After this, things get educational. You're bluffing. But the bravado in the alien's voice was cracking. 3 ships against a dreadnought, 10 seconds. You know what? You're probably right. 3 ships against a dreadnought isn't a fair fight. Marcus's smile widened as more contacts appeared on the display. 6 more human vessels dropped their stealth screens, followed by another 8. The space around Kepler. 442 suddenly crawled with predators. 5 seconds. It's not fair to the dreadnought. The silence that followed was absolute. Time's up, Marcus said quietly. But since you seem like reasonable beings, let me make you a counter-offer. Withdraw now, and we'll pretend this was all a misunderstanding. Stay, and we'll demonstrate why humans earned the right to name our homeworld after a goddess of death. Earth isn't named after... Check your etymology files, Marcus interrupted. Terra, Gaia, Earth, all names for the same thing. The world that eats its young and makes survivors out of the survivors. The world that taught us that the only predators worth fearing are the ones you don't see coming. The Zephyrian formation was beginning to waver. Marcus could see individual fighters breaking from their assigned positions as pilots realized how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. You want to know why we called this planet Kepler, all? 442, Marcus continued, because it's exactly 1,200 light-years from Earth. Do you know how many human ships have passed through this sector in the last decade? How many observers have been placed on stations just like this one? The implication hit the alien pilots like a physical blow. If humans had been monitoring this sector for years, gathering intelligence, placing assets, we've been watching you, Marcus said softly, learning your patterns, your tactics, your weaknesses. Studying you the same way our ancestors studied mammoths and saber-toothed tigers. You see vermin when you look at us. We see prey that thinks it's a predator. The squadron leader's voice was barely a whisper. What do you want? Simple, you leave, now. And you spread the word to your empire. Humans are no longer available for exploitation. Find easier prey. The Sovereign will never... Marcus cut him off. The Sovereign is currently being painted by 17 different targeting systems. Each one is operated by someone who spent their childhood learning to kill things that were bigger, faster, and stronger than they were. Your choice. The tactical display showed the Zephyrian fighters beginning to withdraw, their tight formation dissolving into the loose scatter of a retreat. The dreadnought's engines flared as it prepared to follow. But Marcus wasn't finished. Oh, and squadron leader, one more thing. Tell your Sovereign that Marcus Chen says hello. Tell him the human he dismissed as an insignificant observer was actually taking his measure. And tell him that next time he wants to hunt, he should be very sure he's not actually the prey. The alien ships accelerated away from Kepler. 442. Their departure, as hasty as their arrival, had been confident. Around the station, beings emerged from shelters and hiding places, staring in amazement at the human vessels that had appeared from nowhere to turn certain destruction into unexpected salvation. Marcus leaned back in the control chair, watching the retreating Zephyrian formation. Phase 4, psychological impact, was complete. Word of this encounter would spread throughout the sector, carried by trading ships and communication networks. The galaxy would learn that humanity was no longer the helpless prey species they'd believed. Administrator Kelleth's voice crackled through the comm system. Human, Marcus. How is this possible? Marcus stood and stretched, already planning his next moves. The Zephyrians would retreat for now, but they'd be back with reinforcements and new tactics. The real work was just beginning. I told you, Administrator. Where I come from, respect is earned. and the currency we use for earning it is simple. We demonstrate that predators who underestimate us tend to become prey themselves. He paused at the engineering bay's exit, looking back at the tactical display where human ships maintained their protective formation around the station. The galaxy is about to learn something new about apex predators. We're not apex because we're the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. We're apex because when something bigger comes along, thinking it can hunt us, Marcus's smile was all teeth. We hunt back. As he walked away, leaving the engineering bay to its normal operations, Marcus was already composing his report to command. The Zephyrian Empire had just received their first real introduction to humanity. Soon, it would be time to introduce them to the rest of the family. Behind him, through the viewports of Kepler, 442, the stars watched in silence as a new kind of predator announced its presence to the galaxy. The emergency session of the Zephyrian High Command convened 12 hours after the Kepler 442 incident. Sovereign Vexay stood before the holographic display showing the tactical replay. His 4 primary arms clasped behind his back while his secondary pair gestured dismissively at the data streams. 17 ships, he said, his voice carrying the controlled fury of absolute authority challenged. 17 primitive human vessels managed to outmaneuver the Sovereign's might and an entire fighter squadron. General Korthak shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My lord, the technology they displayed was unlike anything in our intelligence files. These stealth systems, their sensor capabilities, are irrelevant. Vexay cut him off. Technology can be reverse-engineered, acquired, or stolen. What concerns me is how they knew our formations, our protocols, our tactical doctrines. The hologram flickered, zooming in on the human ship's approach vectors. Each vessel had moved with precision that spoke of intimate knowledge of Zephyrian military procedures, knowledge that should have been impossible for a species barely a century into interstellar travel. Admiral Thisara leaned forward, her scarred chitin reflecting the blue glow of the tactical display. The humans spoke of observers, my sovereign. If they have been infiltrating our territory for years, then we have been blind fools. Vexay finished, playing at being apex predators while actual predators studied us like specimens. The sovereign moved to the chamber center, where a 3-dimensional map of the local sector rotated slowly. Hundreds of systems sparkled in the hologram, each one marked with territorial designations, trade routes, and strategic importance ratings. The human colonial zones appeared as small amber clusters scattered throughout the display. How many of our worlds have human observers visited? Vexay asked quietly. Unknown, my lord. Intelligence Director Malshef admitted. We are conducting emergency sweeps of all major installations, but if their infiltration capabilities match what we observed at Kepler 442, they could be anywhere, the sovereign concluded. Watching, learning, planning. He studied the holographic map for a long moment. Show me the human territories again. The display shifted, highlighting the known human colonies in brighter amber. They formed a rough sphere perhaps 50 light-years in diameter, centered around their homeworld system. Compared to the Zephyrian Empire's vast territories, it looked insignificant. 43 settled worlds, Malx reported. Population approximately 12 billion across all colonies. Military assessment shows minimal conventional forces, mostly system patrol vessels and cargo haulers. Yet they fielded 20 ships at Kepler, Dardo, 442, none of which appear in any official human fleet registry, Admiral Thisara observed. Either their true military capacity is far beyond our estimates, or those weren't military vessels at all, Vexay said slowly. A new possibility was forming in his mind, one that made his secondary heart skip in rhythm. Director Malksiftem, what do we know about human civilian space travel? Civilian, my lord, their commercial shipping follows standard patterns. Cargo vessels, passenger transports, mining platforms. No, the sovereign interrupted. Individual travel. Personal vessels. How do humans move through space when they're not following official channels? The intelligence director's compound eyes flickered as he accessed data files. Records are incomplete, my lord. Human space traffic control appears decentralized. Many vessels operate with minimal oversight. Vexay felt something cold settle in his stomach. In Zephyrian space, every ship was tracked, registered, and monitored. The concept of civilian vessels operating independently was almost unthinkable. But if humans routinely traveled in personal craft, if their space lanes were filled with unmonitored traffic... How many ships, he asked? My lord? How many human vessels exist that are not part of their official fleets? How many private traders, explorers, settlers, miners, researchers, tourists? How many individual humans own spacecraft? The Malksef's silence was answer enough. General Korthak leaned forward. Surely they cannot have significant military capabilities if they're distributed among civilian populations. On Zephyros, what percentage of the population receives combat training? Vex High asked. The military caste represents approximately 8% of 8%, the Sovereign repeated. And humans? Admiral Tessara consulted her own files. Their military forces represent roughly 2% of the total population. No, Vexay said quietly. What percentage of their population receives combat training? The question hung in the air, as the implications became clear. Zephyrian society was rigidly stratified. Warriors trained for war, workers focused on labor, thinkers devoted to intellectual pursuits. But Earth's history suggested a different pattern entirely. Malksef's voice was subdued as he pulled up cultural analysis files. According to our anthropological studies, human military doctrine emphasizes universal service. Most adult humans receive at least basic combat training. Many maintain those skills throughout their lives through recreational activities they call hunting and sport shooting. They hunt for recreation, Tessara said slowly. They practice killing as entertainment. It gets worse, Malksef continued. Human civilian education includes mandatory instruction in what they term survival skills. Even their children learn to fight, to hide, to evade pursuit. They call it camping and hiking and treat it as family bonding time. Vex High studied the holographic map again. The small ambosphere of human space suddenly looked very different. Not a cluster of vulnerable colonies, but a training ground that had produced 12 billion individuals who thought of combat and survival as normal life skills. Show me the Kepler. 442 engagement again, he ordered. Focus on the human ship movements. The tactical replay resumed, displaying the dance of vessels around the station. Vex High watched with new eyes as the human ships emerged from stealth. Their positioning wasn't just militarily sound, it was perfect. Each vessel had moved to maximize tactical advantage while minimizing exposure to counterattack. Pause, he commanded as the display froze. Director, what do we know about the individual who identified himself as Marcus Chen? Limited information, my lord. Officially listed as a cultural liaison for the Human Colonial Authority. Previous assignments include diplomatic missions to 3 systems in this sector. Diplomatic missions, Vex High mused. Or reconnaissance. Show me his movement patterns over the past year. The hologram shifted to display Marcus Chen's travel history, a web of connections spread across the sector, touching trading stations, colony worlds, and industrial platforms. Everywhere humans might want to establish a presence or gather intelligence, he's not alone. The Sovereign realized. This Chen is part of a network. How many other cultural liaisons are operating in our territory? We are investigating, my lord, but we don't know. Vexay finished. We don't know how many of them there are, where they've been, or what they've learned. He turned away from the hologram. Order all military installations to maximum alert. Begin immediate security sweeps of every facility that has hosted human visitors in the past 5 years. My lord, General Korthak ventured, surely you're not suggesting that this single incident represents a genuine threat to the Empire? Vexai fixed him with a stare that had reduced admirals to silence. General, what do you know about Earth's predatory species? My lord? Their homeworld. The planet that produced these humans. What manner of creatures dominated it? Korthak consulted his files. Large carnivores, my lord. Primitive beasts, mammals called lions, tigers, bears. All extinct or confined to preservation areas. All killed by humans. Vex High, corrected. A species that evolved alongside creatures that could tear them apart with claws and teeth. And yet humans survived. More than survived, they eliminated their competition and claimed dominion over their entire world. The implications settled over the command chamber like a cold wind. Admiral, the Sovereign continued. I want detailed intelligence on human space capabilities, not their official fleets. Their true capacity. Every private vessel, every armed trader, every civilian craft that could potentially be converted to military use. My lord, that could take. It will take exactly as long as it takes. Vexay said flatly. Because while we've been playing games with inferior species, real predators have been watching us, learning our weaknesses, preparing. He gestured to the holographic map, where human space glowed amber against the dark. Gentlemen, we have spent decades assuming our superiority based on our technology and our traditional enemies' predictability. We have fought wars against beings who think like us, who follow patterns we understand. The sovereign paused, letting his words sink in. But humans don't think like us. They evolved in a galaxy of one, a closed system where survival required them to outfight, outsmart, and outlast everything that wanted to kill them. They learned to be predators in a way we never had to. Director Malksev cleared his throat nervously. My lord, what do you recommend? Reconnaissance. Vexhai said immediately. I want to know everything about human capabilities. Their technology, their numbers, their strategies. Most importantly, I want to understand how they think. And if they prove to be a genuine threat? The sovereign's smile was entirely without humor. Then we will have learnt a valuable lesson about underestimating prey that fights back. But first, we learn. We adapt. We prove that Zephyrian intelligence is superior to human cunning. As the meeting concluded and his officers filed out, Vex Hay remained before the holographic display. The human territories glowed softly in the artificial starlight, no longer looking like scattered colonies but like forward observation posts of a species that had spent millennia learning to hunt in the dark. Marcus Chen had said something during the encounter that echoed in the sovereign's mind. We hunt back. Simple words, but they contained a promise that made Vexhay's exoskeleton prickle with unease. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled this sector for 3 centuries through superior technology and overwhelming force. They had never encountered a species that refused to acknowledge their dominance. But humans had evolved on a world where dominance meant nothing, where survival was the only currency that mattered. Now those humans were among the stars, carrying with them millions of years of predatory instinct honed by a planet that had tried its best to kill them. They moved through space not as conquerors but as hunters, patient and observant and utterly ruthless when threatened. Vex Hay studied the display for another hour before finally retiring to his chambers. As he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the dark between the stars, human eyes were watching him, learning his patterns, his weaknesses, his fears. The hunt, he realized, had already begun. The only question was, who would emerge as predator and who would become prey? Meanwhile, 300 light-years away, Marcus Chen sat in the captain's chair of the stealth ship Nightingale, reviewing intelligence reports from across the sector. The Kepler 442 incident had achieved its primary objective. The Zephyrians now knew that humanity was more than they'd assumed. But Marcus had bigger plans. Signal from command, sir, his communications officer reported. Operation Apex is approved for the next phase. Marcus nodded, studying the tactical display that showed Zephyrian fleet movements across the sector. Their enemies were beginning to respond exactly as predicted, pulling back, consolidating, trying to understand what they were really facing. Excellent. Begin Phase 2. It's time to show them what happens when predators get serious about hunting. The Nightingale slipped deeper into the void, vanishing among the stars like a shadow with teeth. Behind it, the galaxy held its breath, as 2 apex species prepared for a confrontation that would determine which one truly deserved the title of ultimate predator. Admiral Thisara stood on the bridge of the battlecruiser, Inexorable Conquest, watching her task force emerge from hyperspace in perfect formation. 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and 48 fighter squadrons, enough firepower to reduce a small moon to constituent atoms, all deployed to investigate reports of human activity in the supposedly empty Zerian system. Contact! Her sensor officer announced. Single vessel, bearing 27 Mark 18. Configuration matches human courier class. Tessera's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. After 3 weeks of chasing shadows and following false leads, they had finally cornered one of the elusive human observers. Signal the vessel to surrender and prepare for boarding. Admiral, her tactical officer interjected. Long-range sensors are detecting additional thermal signatures in the asteroid field, possibly more human vessels attempting to hide. How many? Thisara asked, moving to the tactical display. Uncertain. The asteroids are interfering with our scans, but I estimate 3 to 5 additional contacts. The Admiral studied the holographic representation of the system. Zerian was a graveyard of shattered worlds, the remnants of planets destroyed in an ancient stellar collapse that had left behind a dense field of metallic debris. Perfect territory for ambush tactics, if the humans were foolish enough to try. Deploy fighters in sweep formation, she ordered. I want every rock in that field examined. If humans think they can hide among debris, they're about to learn the folly of challenging Zephyrian military doctrine. The fighter squadrons launched with practiced precision, their sleek forms spreading out to begin a systematic search of the asteroid field. On the tactical display, red dots representing Zephyrian forces moved with methodical efficiency through the maze of floating stone and metal. "Admiral," the communications officer said, "the human courier is responding to our hail. Put it through." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a human figure in a simple flight suit. Male, middle-aged, with the kind of weathered features that suggested years of space travel. He appeared completely calm despite being outnumbered by approximately 400 to 1. "This is Captain David Morrison of the independent trader Wanderer," the human said. "Is there a problem, Admiral?" "You are in violation of Zephyrian territorial space," the Sisara replied. "You will surrender your vessel and submit to questioning." Morrison tilted his head slightly. "Actually, Admiral, I think you'll find that Zirian's system was never formally claimed by any interstellar power. According to the Galactic Navigation Authority, it's classified as neutral space. Irrelevant. By order of the Sovereign, all space within 50 light-years of Zephyrian holdings is subject to our security protocols." "Ah," Morrison said, nodding as if this made perfect sense. "Well, that does create a bit of a problem. The only problem you face is whether you surrender peacefully or are taken by force." Morrison glanced at something off camera, then looked back at this Asara with an expression that might have been sympathy. "Admiral, can I ask you something? How familiar are you with human hunting practices?" "What?" The question was so unexpected that Thisara found herself momentarily off balance. "Hunting," Morrison repeated. "See, where I come from, when you want to catch something dangerous, you don't just chase it down. You study it first, learn its patterns, its behavior, its preferred hunting grounds. Then you set a trap." Thisara felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. "What are you implying?" "Oh, I'm not implying anything," Morrison said cheerfully. "I'm stating it outright. You see, Admiral, we've been watching your fleet movements for the past 3 weeks. Every time you responded to a human sighting, every time you deployed your forces to investigate our activities, we learned that you prefer overwhelming force, that you follow standard search patterns, and that you really, really like asteroid fields for military operations." On the tactical display, Thisasara watched her fighter squadrons continue their methodical sweep. Everything appeared normal. Standard search protocols being executed with Zephyrian precision. "So," Morrison continued, "we decided to give you exactly what you were looking for. One human courier in a debris field, with just enough additional thermal signatures to make you think you'd cornered a small group trying to hide." "You're suggesting this is a trap?" Thisara's voice carried more skepticism than confidence.
Not suggesting.
Confirming. Morrison's smile widened. "Admiral, you're currently conducting a sweep pattern that has positioned your fighters in a classic envelopment formation. Very textbook. Very predictable. Very vulnerable." Thisasara spun toward her tactical officer. "Full sensor sweep. I want to know about every grain of sand in this system." "Scanning now, Admiral. I'm reading—" "Wait." The officer's voice went flat. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildup throughout the asteroid field. Multiple sources. They're everywhere." The tactical display suddenly erupted with new contacts. What had appeared to be asteroids revealed themselves as human ships, shedding camouflage fields and powering up weapon systems. Dozens of them, positioned throughout the field in a perfect sphere that enclosed the Zephyrian fleet. "Impossible," Thisasara breathed. "Our sensors would have detected them." "Actually," Morrison said, his voice now carrying an edge of steel, "your sensors did detect them. You've been looking right at them for the past hour. You just assumed they were rocks." The human ships began moving, converging on the Zephyrian formation with deadly purpose. These weren't the sleek vessels that had appeared at Kepler 442. These were different. Bulkier, more angular. Built for a specific purpose that became clear as they opened fire. But they weren't firing energy weapons. Instead, streams of projectiles erupted from their hulls. Kinetic rounds accelerated to incredible velocities, turning chunks of asteroid debris into devastating ammunition. "Rail guns," Thisara's tactical officer reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "They're using the asteroid field as a weapons depot. The first wave of projectiles struck the Zephyrian fighters with devastating effect. Ships designed to withstand energy weapons found themselves unable to cope with solid matter moving at significant fractions of light speed. Explosions blossomed throughout the formation as fighters were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. "All ships, return fire," Thisara commanded. "Target the human vessels." Energy beams lanced out from the Zephyrian fleet, striking the human ships with enough power to vaporize conventional armor. But the humans had prepared for this too. Their vessels were covered in ablative plating that absorbed and dispersed energy attacks, while their constant motion through the asteroid field made them nearly impossible to target effectively. "Admiral," her weapons officer called out, "our energy weapons are heating the debris field. The thermal blooms are interfering with our targeting systems." Tissera watched in growing horror as the tactical situation deteriorated. The humans had turned the entire asteroid field into a weapon, using their enemy's own firepower against them while remaining effectively invisible among the rocks and debris. "They're using the environment itself as camouflage and ammunition," she realized aloud. Morrison's voice crackled through the comm system. "Now you're beginning to understand, Admiral. See, Zephyrian military doctrine assumes you'll be fighting in open space against conventional opponents. But humans learned to fight in forests, in mountains, in swamps, anywhere we could use the terrain to our advantage." Another wave of kinetic rounds swept through the Zephyrian formation. This time they were larger, chunks of iron and nickel the size of ground vehicles, accelerated to velocities that turned them into unstoppable projectiles. 3 destroyers simply ceased to exist as the improvised ammunition punched through their hulls. "You adapt your environment to suit your needs," Morrison continued as Tissera watched her fleet being systematically dismantled. "We adapt ourselves to suit our environment. Right now, your environment is an asteroid field filled with humans who have had weeks to prepare for your arrival." "All ships, withdraw," Tissera ordered. "Emergency jump to hyperspace." But as her fleet attempted to disengage, they discovered the final layer of the human trap. Gravitational anomalies throughout the system prevented clean hyperspace transitions. Ships attempting to jump found themselves caught in unstable field fluctuations that threatened to tear their hulls apart. "You can't leave," Morrison said, his tone almost apologetic. "We've been seeding this system with gravitational dampers for the past month. Nothing jumps to hyperspace without our permission." Tissera felt panic begin to override her military training. Her overwhelming fleet was trapped in a killing field, being systematically destroyed by enemies she could barely detect, using weapons that turned the environment itself against her forces. "What do you want?" she asked. "To send a message," Morrison replied. "You see, Admiral, your empire has spent decades assuming that superior technology and overwhelming force were enough to dominate this galaxy. But you never learnt the most important lesson about being apex predators." Another salvo of kinetic rounds eliminated 6 more fighters. The human ships continued their dance through the asteroids, appearing just long enough to fire before vanishing back into the debris field. "There's always something bigger, faster, and meaner than you are," Morrison said. "On Earth, we learned that the hard way. We learned that survival doesn't depend on being the strongest, it depends on being the smartest, the most adaptable, and the most patient."
Tissera's tactical display showed the devastating truth of her situation.
Of her original force, less than 60% remained combat effective. The humans were picking apart her fleet with surgical precision, targeting command vessels and weapon platforms while avoiding unnecessary casualties. "We've been watching your empire for years," Morrison continued. "Learning your tactics, your technology, your weaknesses. We know exactly how you think, how you fight, how you respond to threats." "And you believe this demonstration will deter the Empire?" Tissera asked, though she already knew the answer. "I believe this demonstration will educate the Empire," Morrison corrected. "You came here expecting to face primitive scavengers. Instead, you encountered predators who have spent millions of years learning to turn every disadvantage into an advantage." The gravitational anomalies suddenly ceased, and Tissera felt her ships regain hyperspace capability. The human fleet stopped firing, though they maintained their threatening positions throughout the asteroid field. "You're letting us go?" Tissera asked. "We're delivering a message," Morrison said. "Take what's left of your fleet back to your sovereign. Tell him that humans are no longer content to be observers. Tell him that we've learned everything we need to know about Zephyrian military capabilities." He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the absolute confidence of someone stating natural law. "And tell him that the next time he sends a fleet into human space, we won't be so polite about asking them to leave." The transmission ended, leaving Tissera staring at a blank screen, while around her, the bridge crew worked frantically to coordinate the withdrawal of their battered fleet. As the surviving ships limped toward the hyperspace jump point, the Admiral found herself thinking about the fundamental assumptions that had governed her entire military career. The Zephyrians had always believed that technological superiority and numerical advantage were the keys to victory. They had built their empire on the principle that overwhelming force could solve any problem. But the humans had just demonstrated something far more dangerous than superior technology: superior thinking. They had turned every advantage the Zephyrians possessed against them, using the enemy's own strength as a weapon while remaining effectively invisible until the moment of attack. As the inexorable conquest jumped to hyperspace, Thisisara began composing her report to the Sovereign. It would be a difficult message to deliver, a confession that the Empire's military doctrine had been completely outclassed by beings they had dismissed as primitive. Behind them, the Xerian system returned to apparent emptiness. The human ships vanished back into the asteroid field, once again becoming indistinguishable from the rocks and debris that surrounded them. But now they waited with the patience of apex predators who had successfully defended their territory. Morrison sat back in his command chair, reviewing the battle data. The engagement had gone exactly as planned, a perfect demonstration of human tactical thinking that would shake Zephyrian confidence to its core. "Signal command," he ordered. "Phase 3 complete. Beginning Phase 4 preparations." Around him, his crew began the methodical work of resetting their trap. The Xerian system would soon see more visitors, and each encounter would teach the galaxy a simple lesson. Humans had not reached the stars by being the strongest or the fastest. They had reached the stars by being the apex predators of a world that had spent billions of years trying to kill them. And now they were ready to remind the galaxy why apex predators were called Apex Sovereign. Vexhai stood in his private chambers studying the holographic display that showed the current disposition of his Empire's forces. Red indicators marked damaged vessels, yellow showed units recalled for refit, and far too many positions were marked in the black of total loss. In 6 weeks, 3 separate encounters with human forces had reduced his sector fleet by 37%. The door chimed, and Director Malsef entered, his usual confidence replaced by the nervous energy of someone bearing unwelcome news. "Report," Vexai commanded without turning from the display. "My lord, our intelligence analysis of the human encounters is complete. The results are disturbing. Define disturbing." Malksif activated his portable holoprojector, overlaying his data onto the Sovereign's strategic display. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our projections in every category. Stealth technology, tactical flexibility, strategic planning, operational security. They outperform us across the spectrum." "Impossible," Vexay said flatly. "There are recently spacefaring species with limited resources. My lord, I believe that assessment may be fundamentally flawed." Malsef hesitated, then continued. "We have been operating under the assumption that humans are attempting to match our technological paradigms. But what if they're operating under completely different principles?" Vexhai finally turned away from the display. "Explain." "Consider the Xerian engagement. Admiral Tissera faced overwhelming tactical disadvantage. Outnumbered, outgunned, caught in a killing field. By all conventional analysis, the humans should have pressed their advantage and destroyed her entire fleet, but they didn't. Exactly. They demonstrated their superiority and then allowed the survivors to escape. This suggests strategic thinking that extends far beyond immediate tactical victory." Vexai moved to his command throne, settling into the elaborate seat while his 4 arms manipulated control interfaces. "You believe they wanted survivors to carry word back to us?" "More than that, my lord. I believe every human action over the past 2 months has been designed to achieve specific psychological objectives." 1. Malksef gestured to the holographic data. "They could have destroyed our forces completely. Instead, they chose to humiliate us publicly while demonstrating capabilities we cannot match." The Sovereign studied the intelligence reports flowing across his displays. Ship movements, resource allocations, diplomatic communications, all painting a picture of an empire whose confidence was slowly eroding. "What do our xenopsychologists say about human behavioral patterns?"
That's part of the problem, my lord.
"Human psychology appears to be fundamentally different from any species we've encountered. They don't think like pack hunters or hive minds or solitary predators. They think like something else. Be specific." Malsefik called up a new data file. "Human evolution occurred on what they call a death world, a planet where survival required constant adaptation to changing threats. Unlike species that evolved stable hierarchies or specialized niches, humans developed what our analysts term adaptive persistence. Meaning, they don't just adapt to challenges, my lord. They actively seek out challenges in order to become stronger. Their entire cultural development is based on the principle that struggle creates superiority." Vexhay felt something cold settle in his primary stomach.
You're saying they view our conflict as
"Beneficial. I'm saying they view our conflict as training, my lord. Every engagement teaches them more about our capabilities while demonstrating their own. From their perspective, we're not enemies to be defeated. We're problems to be solved. The implications hit the Sovereign like a physical blow. The humans weren't just fighting back against Zephyrian aggression, they were using that aggression as a tool for their own development. Every attack on human interests became a learning opportunity. Every victory against Zephyrian forces was data to be analyzed and incorporated into future strategies. Show me their territorial movements. Vex High ordered. The hologram shifted to display human space over the past 6 months. The amber indicators that marked their settlements had spread significantly, but not in the random expansion pattern typical of developing civilizations. Instead, they formed a carefully structured network that maximized defensive coverage while establishing observation posts throughout the sector. They're not building an empire, the Sovereign realized. They're building a laboratory. Yes, my lord, every human colony, every trading post, every diplomatic mission, all positioned to gather intelligence and test our responses. We have been unknowingly participating in the largest military research project in galactic history. Vex High stood abruptly, his secondary arms clenching into fists. How long have they been watching us? Based on the sophistication of their knowledge of our systems, we estimate at least 15 years, possibly longer. 15 years, Vex High repeated. While we dismissed them as insignificant vermin, they were studying us like laboratory specimens. A new alarm sounded throughout the chamber, and Vex High's personal communications array activated automatically. The face of Admiral Thisara appeared on the main screen, her usual composure replaced by barely controlled panic. My lord, we have an emergency situation developing across the entire sector. Human activities have been detected simultaneously at 17 different locations. What kind of activities? Unknown, my lord. They appear to be establishing some kind of network. Communication arrays, sensor platforms, supply depots, all positioned at strategic points along our major shipping lanes. Vexe exchanged glances with Malxiv. How did we not detect these installations until now? That's the problem, my lord. We did detect them. Our automated systems logged them as commercial mining operations, research stations, and communications relays, all perfectly legal under existing trade agreements. But now they're revealing their true nature? They're not revealing anything, my lord. We're simply beginning to understand what they've been building. Thisara's image flickered as she consulted her tactical displays. These installations form a comprehensive sensor network that covers approximately 80% of our territory. The Sovereign felt his exoskeleton begin to prickle with stress responses. A sensor network that has been operating undetected for how long? Unknown. But our communication specialists are detecting data traffic that suggests years of continuous operation. Malx, Hep leaned forward. My lord, if humans have been monitoring our communications for years, then they know everything. Vex High finished. Fleet dispositions, supply lines, strategic planning, internal politics, everything we've discussed, every decision we've made, every weakness we've revealed in private. The full scope of human strategy was becoming clear. While the Zephyrian Empire had been playing at interstellar politics, humanity had been conducting a comprehensive intelligence operation that made their enemies transparent while keeping their own capabilities hidden. Admiral, Vex High addressed the screen. What is the status of our fleet? Operational, my lord, but our crews are reporting morale issues. Word of the human capabilities has spread throughout the service. Many officers are questioning whether our traditional tactics remain viable. And our allies? Thisara's expression grew even more grim. The Nexari Confederation has recalled their border fleets to defensive positions. The Corvin Trade Alliance has suspended all operations in sectors with reported human activity. Several minor powers are requesting clarification of our policies regarding human expansion. Vex High nodded slowly. The humans had achieved something remarkable. They had undermined Zephyrian credibility without directly challenging their authority. By demonstrating superior capabilities and strategic thinking, they had forced the Empire's allies to reconsider their positions. Director, the Sovereign said, I need updated projections on human military capacity. My lord, our estimates may be fundamentally unreliable. The humans have demonstrated stealth technology that renders their true force numbers unknown. They could have 10 ships or 10,000. Our sensors cannot distinguish between their vessels and background radiation when they choose to remain hidden. What about their population centers? Surely they cannot hide entire worlds. Their colonies are real and vulnerable, Malxef confirmed. but our analysts believe they may represent only a fraction of actual human presence in the galaxy. If humans favor dispersed, mobile populations living aboard spacecraft, then we have no idea how many of them there actually are, Vexhai concluded. We could be facing an enemy with unlimited reserves and perfect intelligence about our operations. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled over them. The Zephyrian Empire, which had dominated this sector through superior technology and overwhelming force, found itself outmaneuvered by an enemy that refused to fight on their terms. My lord. Admiral Tissacera's voice carried a note of urgency. We're receiving a transmission on all frequencies. It appears to be coming from the human network installations simultaneously. Put it through. The display shifted to show Marcus Chen sitting in what appeared to be a command center. Behind him, holographic displays showed real-time intelligence on Zephyrian fleet movements, communication intercepts, and strategic assessments. Sovereign Vexai, Marcus said, his tone conversational but carrying an edge of steel. I believe it's time we had a proper conversation. You dare to contact me directly? I dare to offer you a choice, Marcus corrected. You see, Sovereign, your empire has reached what we call a decision point. You can continue operating under the assumption that humans are a minor threat to be contained, or you can acknowledge the reality of your situation. And what reality is that? Marcus smiled. That you have been outplayed so thoroughly that your continued existence depends entirely on human restraint. He gestured to the displays behind him. We know the location of every Zephyrian installation. We have been monitoring your communications for years. We understand your technology, your tactics, your psychology, and your weaknesses better than you understand them yourselves. Vexai felt rage building in his secondary hearts. You claim superiority based on espionage and guerrilla tactics. If you truly believe yourself superior, face us in open battle.
Why? Marcus asked reasonably.
Superior predators don't give up their advantages for the sake of fair play. We have spent 50,000 years learning that survival goes to the intelligent, not the proud. The human leaned forward slightly. But if you insist on a demonstration, we can arrange one. Tomorrow at 1400 hours Galactic Standard Time, your Sovereign Guard fleet will depart your home system for what your intelligence believes is a routine patrol sweep. They will encounter a single human vessel in the Tartarus Nebula. How do you know our patrol schedules? We know everything, Sovereign. We know that you're planning to deploy your entire strategic reserve in a coordinated assault on human space. We know about your alliance negotiations with the Corvan Trade Federation. We know about the secret weapons research on Zephyros 7. Marcus paused, letting that sink in. We know about your personal doubts regarding this conflict, and we know about the growing opposition to your leadership within the High Command. Vexai's exoskeleton went rigid.
The information Marcus had just referenced was known to fewer than a dozen individuals in the entire empire.
Impossible. That intelligence is compartmentalized at the highest levels. Nothing is impossible for apex predators who have had adequate time to prepare, Marcus said quietly. Sovereign, your empire is not facing a military threat. You are facing an entirely different kind of organism, one that views your aggression as useful data rather than existential danger. The transmission ended, leaving Vexhai staring at a blank screen while around him, his advisors exchanged nervous glances. My lord, Malksef said finally, what are your orders? Vexhai stood silent for a long moment, considering his options. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that rendered traditional military solutions inadequate. They possessed intelligence that made strategic planning impossible. Most importantly, they had revealed a perspective that treated the Zephyrian Empire not as an enemy to be feared, but as a problem to be managed. Cancel the Sovereign Guard deployment, he said finally, and prepare a priority communication to the human leadership. It appears we have underestimated our opposition. As his advisors scrambled to implement his orders, Vexhai found himself contemplating a new reality. The galaxy had indeed gained a new apex predator. But unlike every other species he had encountered, these predators were not interested in dominance. They were interested in evolution. And they had just revealed that the Zephyrian Empire was simply the latest step in their educational process. The Galactic Council chambers had never witnessed a session quite like this one. Representatives from 47 different species filled the vast amphitheater, their bioluminescent translation matrices casting rainbow patterns across the curved walls, as dozens of languages were processed simultaneously. At the center of it all, Sovereign Vexhay of the Zephyrian Empire stood before the assembly, his once proud bearing reduced to the careful posture of someone who had learned the difference between authority and survival. "Honored delegates," Vexhay began, his words carrying to every corner of the chamber, "I appear before you today to formally withdraw all Zephyrian territorial claims in the disputed sectors surrounding human space." A wave of shocked chittering, whistling, and harmonics swept through the assembly. The Zephyrian Empire had not surrendered territory to anyone in over 2 centuries. Furthermore, Vexhay continued, the Empire formally recognizes human sovereignty over all systems currently under their administration, and agrees to the establishment of a 50-light-year neutral zone around their territorial boundaries. Ambassador Keleth of the Nexari Confederation rose from his delegation's position. "Sovereign Vexhay, the Council requires clarification. Are you surrendering to a species that controls fewer than 50 star systems?" "I am acknowledging reality," Vexhay replied. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities that render traditional territorial concepts obsolete." "Elaborate." Vexhay gestured to the massive holographic display that dominated the chamber's center. 3 months ago, human representatives provided the Zephyrian government with detailed intelligence on all Imperial military installations, resource extraction operations, and strategic planning initiatives covering the past 5 years. The display flickered to life, showing a 3-dimensional map of Zephyrian space. Every world, every station, every fleet deployment was marked in precise detail, information that should have been impossible for any external power to acquire. "They knew everything," Vexhay said simply. "Ship movements, communication protocols, resource allocation, personal relationships within the command structure, every detail necessary to completely neutralize our military capabilities without firing a single shot." Representative Thix of the Crystalline Coalition pulsed with confused harmonics. If they possess such intelligence, why did they not exploit it for conquest? "Because," came a new voice from the chamber's entrance, "conquest was never our objective." Every head, sensor cluster, and optical array in the assembly turned toward the source. Marcus Chen walked down the central aisle, wearing simple civilian clothing that somehow commanded more attention than any ceremonial regalia. Behind him came a small delegation of humans, the first official diplomatic party their species had ever sent to the Galactic Council. "Honored delegates," Marcus continued as he reached the speaking platform. "I am Marcus Chen, representing the Human Colonial Authority. We appreciate the Council's permission to address this assembly." "Permission that was never formally granted," Ambassador Keleth pointed out. "Permission that was assumed based on the principle of galactic citizenship," Marcus corrected smoothly. "Unless the Council wishes to formally declare that humans are not recognized as a legitimate interstellar civilization." The implication hung in the air like an undetonated weapon. If the Council refused to recognize human legitimacy, they would be establishing a precedent that any species could be excluded from galactic governance. If they granted recognition, they would be acknowledging human authority to speak for their interests. "The human representative may address the assembly," declared Councillor Prime Zephex, the ancient being whose species had founded the Council millennia ago. "State your purpose." Marcus nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Councillor Prime. We are here to discuss the future of interstellar relations now that the galaxy has gained its first true apex predator species." The chamber erupted in protests and challenges. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages, while translation matrices struggled to keep pace with the cacophony. Marcus waited patiently for the noise to subside. "I understand your skepticism," he said once order was restored. "Every species represented here has achieved interstellar travel, built impressive civilizations, and demonstrated remarkable technological capabilities. From your perspective, humans are newcomers with limited resources and modest territorial holdings." He gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show human space, a small cluster of amber dots in the vast star map. "You're absolutely correct. We control fewer worlds than most trading coalitions. Our technology is centuries behind galactic standards. Our population is a fraction of most established civilizations." Marcus paused, studying the assembled delegates. "But you're measuring the wrong things." The display changed again, this time showing Earth, a blue-green marble suspended in space, surrounded by data streams showing atmospheric composition, geological activity, and biological diversity. "This is our homeworld," Marcus said. "For 4 billion years, it hosted the most competitive evolutionary environment in known space. Every organism that survived did so by outcompeting millions of others for limited resources. Every species that achieved dominance had to defend it against constant challenges from faster, stronger, or more numerous rivals. The data streams shifted to show Earth's predatory species, great white sharks, Siberian tigers, polar bears, crocodiles, and dozens of others. These creatures represent the apex predators of our world. Each one perfectly adapted to dominate their environment through superior hunting ability, tactical intelligence, and physical prowess. Marcus gestured to include himself and the human delegation. They're all extinct or confined to preservation areas, not because of climate change or disease or cosmic catastrophe, because humans proved to be better apex predators, representative thicks pulsed with confused frequencies. You destroyed your own world's dominant species? We outcompeted them, Marcus corrected. Through superior adaptability, more sophisticated social organization, and most importantly, the ability to learn from every encounter and improve our strategies accordingly. The display shifted again, showing human technological development from the Stone Age through interstellar flight. The progression was remarkably rapid compared to most species' developmental timelines. Other civilizations achieved spaceflight through gradual technological evolution over tens of thousands of years. Humans reached the stars in less than a century because we had spent millennia learning to adapt, innovate, and overcome challenges that should have been impossible to survive.
Ambassador Kelleth leaned forward. Your point being?
My point being that apex predators aren't defined by their size, their strength, or their technology,
Marcus said.
They're defined by their ability to dominate whatever environment they inhabit, and humans have just entered your environment. Sovereign Vexay stepped forward. Perhaps I should explain what that means in practical terms. He activated his personal holo-projector, overlaying new data onto the chamber's display. 6 months ago, the Zephyrian Empire began what we believed was a routine territorial expansion into human space. We expected minimal resistance from a primitive species with limited military capabilities. The tactical data from Kepler, 442, Zerion, and a dozen other encounters played out in real time, showing human forces appearing from nowhere to deliver precise, devastating attacks before vanishing back into space. Instead, we discovered that humans had been monitoring our activities for years. They knew our capabilities better than we did. They understood our psychology, our tactics, our weaknesses, all while remaining completely invisible to our intelligence apparatus. Most disturbing, Dex High continued, was the realization that humans weren't trying to defeat us. They were studying us. Every engagement was a learning experience that improved their understanding of galactic military doctrine. Marcus nodded, which brings us to why we're here today. The Zephyrian Empire represents the strongest military power in this sector. Their technology is advanced, their tactics are sophisticated, and their strategic thinking is based on thousands of years of successful expansion. He paused, letting the implications settle. And they couldn't present a meaningful challenge to human capabilities once we decided to take them seriously. The chamber fell silent. The weight of that statement, that the galaxy's dominant military power was merely a training exercise for humanity, settled over the assembly like a heavy shroud. "What do you want?" Counselor Prime Zephex asked finally. "Partnership," Marcus said immediately. "Humans didn't evolve to be conquerors, we evolved to be survivors. We have no interest in ruling the galaxy. We're interested in ensuring the galaxy remains a place worth surviving in."
He gestured to the assembled representatives.
Every species here has achieved something remarkable. You've built civilizations, explored the cosmos, developed technologies and cultures that represent millions of years of evolution. From our perspective, you represent the finest achievements of galactic civilization. But your current political structures are inefficient. You have wars, territorial disputes, resource conflicts, and the constant threat of powerful species dominating weaker ones. This creates instability that threatens everyone's long-term survival. Representative Thix pulsed with cautious interest. You propose to resolve these conflicts? We propose to provide a stabilizing influence, Marcus corrected. Humans excel at identifying and neutralizing threats before they become existential problems. We've spent our entire evolutionary history learning to maintain balance in competitive ecosystems. And if we refuse this partnership? Ambassador Kelleth asked. Marcus's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Then you continue operating under the current system, knowing that there's a species in the galaxy that views your conflicts as training exercises and your military capabilities as interesting but ultimately irrelevant challenges. The silence that followed was absolute. However, Marcus continued, his tone brightening, partnership offers significant advantages. Human intelligence networks can help prevent conflicts before they start. Our tactical expertise can resolve disputes quickly and efficiently. Most importantly, our presence provides security against external threats. External threats? Sovereign Vexay asked. Counselor Prime, how long has galactic civilization existed in this sector? Approximately 12,000 years, the ancient being replied. And in that time, have you ever wondered what exists beyond the borders of explored space? Whether other civilizations with different values might someday arrive with intentions less benevolent than ours. The question hung in the air, like a sword of Damocles. Every delegate present understood the implications. If humans could appear from nowhere with capabilities that overwhelmed established powers, what other surprises might the galaxy contain? We offer our services as apex predators in residence, Marcus said. A stabilizing force that ensures the continuation and development of galactic civilization while deterring external threats and preventing internal conflicts from escalating beyond manageable levels. And if we accept this offer, Counselor Prime's effects said slowly, what guarantees do we have regarding human intentions? The same guarantee every ecosystem provides, Marcus replied. Apex predators survive by maintaining the health of their environment. We have no interest in destroying the civilization that now represents our hunting ground. We're invested in ensuring it thrives. He gestured to his delegation. Every human in this chamber represents billions of others who are now scattered throughout the galaxy. We're not conquerors seeking territory. We're gardeners ensuring our garden remains productive. Vote, Counselor Prime Zep Hex announced suddenly. All delegates will register their position on formal recognition of human authority in matters of interstellar security. The voting process took less than 10 minutes. When the results appeared on the chamber's display, they showed unanimous approval, not because every species trusted human intentions, but because every species understood the alternative. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out, Sovereign Vexay approached Marcus at the speaking platform. An impressive performance, the Zephyrian said. Though I suspect the reality of human governance will prove more complex than your presentation suggested. Marcus smiled. Sovereign, complexity is what we do best. We've been managing complex ecosystems for 50,000 years. Political ecosystems are just another variation on familiar themes. And if some species prove difficult to manage, then we'll adapt our approach until we find solutions that work. That's what apex predators do. We persist until we succeed. Vexahay nodded slowly. I believe I understand now why your species calls itself humanity rather than humanity. You're not just individuals who happen to share a species, you're expressions of a single adaptive organism. Every apex predator is sovereign. The difference is that most predators adapt to their environment. We adapt our environment to ourselves. As Marcus prepared to leave the chamber, Vexay called out one final question. What happens now? Marcus paused at the chamber's exit, looking back at the Zephyrian leader. Now we begin the real work, building a galaxy where every species can achieve its full potential while ensuring no single power becomes a threat to the others, creating stability through strength rather than domination. He smiled. Welcome to the human age, Sovereign. I think you're going to find it educational. As the chamber emptied, the great holographic display continued showing the star map with its new reality, a galaxy where the apex predators had finally revealed themselves, not as conquerors but as gardeners. Every species would now develop under the watchful eyes of beings who understood that true strength lay not in domination, but in ensuring that the ecosystem itself remained healthy enough to support everyone within it. The age of human oversight had begun. And across the galaxy, civilizations that had spent millennia fighting for dominance were about to learn what it meant to thrive under the protection of predators who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to survive by making their environment more survivable. The galaxy had gained its first true apex predator species. But more than that, it had gained gardeners who understood that the best gardens were those where every organism could flourish under the guidance of those who knew how to maintain the balance between growth and sustainability. Humanity had finally come home to the stars. And they had brought with them the hard-won wisdom of a species that had learned to be apex, not by destroying their environment, but by becoming the force that ensured their environment could support life for all its inhabitants. The hunt was over. The gardening had begun.